Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, back from that fishing trip that we took there. And I'm going to work today on a Daiwa. Many of you know I'm a fan of the older Daiwas. I like them a lot. This is the Daiwa GS13, the Gold Series. It's got 3-ball bearings. It's a size 30 reel, and it's probably one step up from the Silver Series, and probably precursor or right along with the Black Gold Series. So I like these reels. I wanted to show you. We found this one at a flea market on one of the prior videos. I showed you that. And we're going to take it apart, show you what it's made of, how to service it, and how to put it out there fishing again. One of the things we'll do on this video, we're going to swap the handle. This handle is for a right side crank, and I'm planning on using them. So I'm going to move it over to be a left-hand crank. So let's take the handle off right away. You do that by removing the screw on the non-handle side, and then there's a through shaft that you simply pull off. And as I do these, I like to put the screw right back into the handle so that I don't lose that at a later point in time when I go to reinstall. A couple of things you'll notice: I have a protective glove on my left hand, and I also use a parts tray for all the pieces and parts that I take off. Next up, let's take the spool off. We can just wind that down, push the button on it. You can do both. You got the button release inside. The reason I took that button off, there's drags in here, so we're going to go in here and take a look at the drags and service those. I'm going to put those aside for now, and then we're going to remove that gear side plate. Show you what it looks like on the inside. Those are 3 screws. They're Phillips head screws. And what I do when I take the case screws off is I lay them down on my board just momentarily. I want to make sure that all of those case screws are the same size. There's a lot of different reels out there where they are not the same size. More in the modern reels than the classics, if you will. I'll call this one a classic for now. But the modern reels, because of the graphite construction of those side plates, sometimes they put bump covers on them and other things, and they use a different screw in certain spots. These 3 are the same, so I'm going to put those into my parts tray. I'm going to pull that side plate off now. This is a good indication there's nothing really going on inside. There's no accumulation of grease in that. So I got this reel for about $15. Actually, I got 2 of them. They were 2 for $25, so a little bit less than $15. And one of the reasons I got it is it's running sluggish. Well, one of the things that is apparent here is that there's a lot of limited grease on this. So we're going to take this bearing off. This bearing seems to be a little bit kind of stuck. So just gently pry up on it to get it over the gear sleeve. We also have that little handle piece here that's stuck inside the gear. We'll take that off, and then we should be able to pull that up. I don't like forcing anything too much, but if you gently pry, generally speaking, you'll be okay. That's what we're sort of doing here. We're walking it up the gear shaft. Then we can get the side plate off. This is the portion that connects to our ring that enables the spool to go up and down. And then we can take the top off here. So there's a pin on here that's where the spool snaps into. So we're going to go ahead and pull the main shaft off. The axle shaft is held to a crosswind block by a small Phillips head screw. We'll take that out. And then we can pull the shaft off. And I'm just feeling it's got a lot of dried grease in it. That's what makes this thing work so slowly or poorly. Then we can should be able to pull the main gear out at that point, and you can see again just an accumulation of a lot of dried grease and the like. And we have a tough bearing here, so I'm going to just grab my 3-in-1 penetrating oil. We're just going to hit this right now and let it sit while we work on the rest of the reel. Same thing with the one on this side. Now I haven't pulled that bearing out completely. It doesn't need to be replaced. Sometimes with wear, these shafts wear over time. And what I just want to make sure we're doing here is just making certain that the bearing is free and operable without risking breaking the main gear. So I'm just going to set that aside in a separate parts bucket, let that work there. And then we'll come up top and we'll take this off. Just have to find the right one. I keep a variety of wrenches here just for that reason. I'm never quite sure which one it's going to be. In this case, it's the 14 millimeter. We're going to pull that off, get underneath, make sure that everything is clear there. And this is very much a traditional setup. For the older reels, you have a anti-reverse mechanism here. We have a pincher that rides on this, and the pincher is friction driven. So as you crank in the right direction, you're okay. When you back it off, you can see that that pincher grabs and it sets the anti-reverse in place. So that's working fine. We don't need to do anything there, but there is a bearing underneath there. So I'm going to go ahead, take this off. We'll pull that other piece off as well, as soon as I get the right tool. Now, some of the newer ones have a spring as opposed to this pincher. There's nothing wrong with the technology either way. There's a, if it is a spring-loaded assembly, then you've got a, watch where the orientation of that spring is as it goes down. Now this bearing is working fine, so if I needed to remove the bearing, I could pull the 3 Phillips head screws there. This is just a tune-up, so I'm just going to let that go. I'm just going to put oil on both sides of it. The bearing is below here as well. So just work the piece in. Hopefully while we're doing all of this, the penetrating oil is working in on the other one as well. I was just looking for my smallest screwdriver, just get some of this dried grease out of the way. That's clearly what has got the performance of this reel lacking a little bit. But it's not terrible, and again, it's clean. It hasn't been over lubed. It doesn't have any contamination in there. So we're in pretty good shape with that. Okay, so next we're just going to put this back together then, and go make sure that we put that collar on. There's a little bit of dirt on this one. We can take some steel wool if you need to. Just kind of clean that off. There's residual there. Now again, this is where that little pincher on the anti-reverse is kind of riding, so you want to make sure that it's contamination free so that it doesn't disrupt the ride. And then that sits on those 2 prongs on the collar there, so make sure you we get those in right. Now a lot of times these start to fail because these become elongated, they start spreading out and not grabbing well. So an easy fix to that, you want to make sure that if you're tuning it up, you want to do, just grab the tips of this. Don't grab it all the way back, but grab the tips and just gently apply a little bit of pressure just to close it down a little bit. You don't want to have it where it's completely grabbing it, but you do want it a little bit, and then you need to remember the orientation that you took this off on. So in this case, just going to go set it like that, and that's the proper orientation. We'll go ahead and put this back on. And not necessarily with this reel, but with some of these reels, it is a little bit more difficult to get over a piece or screw or something. So it makes sense to do that ahead of schedule. And if you have if you've worked on the Abu bait casters, you'll find that it's a very similar setup for the anti-reverse, even though this is a Daiwa reel. But again, that technology, that pinching technology, been around for a long time now. So, okay, so we got that set up there. That should be working fine. We'll just give it a test. Yep, it's working just the way it should. No lubrication required, or I wouldn't even recommend it. Little drop of oil on the screw shaft is fine, but don't go nuts putting stuff onto the click rotor. You're only going to get in trouble later on. Okay, this gear is clean. If it wasn't clean, I'd go ahead and I would put some WD-40 on it or some other kind of penetrating oil to free it up, and then I'd probably use a toothpick or an awl or a little pin or something to get that done. But here it's clean. I'm just going to re-lube, and then we're going to go over to this crosswind block, get the junk off of that. Because that's going to impact the performance of the reel, and you don't want to slow a reel down because it's trying to get out of basically a tar. Okay, once we've done that, we realize that we can reinstall this. But before we do that, let's go ahead and close the top of this up. So we've got a functioning bail. You just want to make sure that it's okay. This one is it's one of these what I call a smack bail. It comes in and you hit it and it pushes it back. This one, just like the other part of it, hasn't been lubed in a while, so I'm just going to throw a little bit of the WD-40. You don't have to do anything on this side, it's just a pin. What the heck, while you're at it, right? Just making sure it's free. If it wasn't functioning properly, you could take this off. There's a spring in there, but in this case, it's tripping fine, and that penetrating oil is making it go very easy. So what happens is you're going to load this up for your cast. It's going to hit that shaft and it's going to knock it back, and this one's doing what it should be doing. Okay, so we'll just load that back in. Get that 14mm nut, put that back on. And we can pretty much get back to that main gear. It should have had enough time now setting to make sure that the bearing is doing fine. We'll give this a spin to make sure that that's working and it's doing exactly what it should be doing. Let's come over here, spin this stuff now. Oh, we want to clean it up first. This one has a lot of dried grease on it as well. And that's part of the problem that we have here in performance. So I'm using the side of the screwdriver actually to do this. You can use other things. You can use a utility knife, any kind of general scraper. You want to be firm, but you certainly don't want to be aggressive in dealing with any of this, especially on all parts that generally are not available. So you do make some compromises in this, and since I'm going to use this one myself, I'm not too worried about leaving the bearing on, for example, as opposed to pulling the bearing. But you do want to make sure that it is fully operational. So we're just cleaning up all the dried grease that's on the inside of this. We've noted already that we have a little bit of dried grease in this bearing. It's not frozen but turning slow, but now I feel it's starting to move up. And one of the ways to free this up, like the others, take a channel lock pliers, if you will, to hold the bearing. I think a piece of braid stuck in that. Hold it. Now you don't want to put any kind of pressure on it whatsoever. Grab it like that. Grab the WD-40. Give it a good shot there, and then turn the thing. And it doesn't take much to free these bearings. So there we go. We're starting to free. There, you're almost done now. It's so that's what's causing this one to perform poorly, is that one was just totally loaded in dried grease. And we're almost done. Yeah, there we go. There we got it. It's funny how that goes like that. Same thing with handle knobs. If you find yourself with a handle knob that is stuck, it's amazing how quickly you can turn that. Now I can turn it by my finger. So we're good now with that bearing, and that makes all the difference in the world in terms of performance, as you'll see when we go to put this back in. So while I'm doing this, interestingly enough, I'm checking the teeth on the main gear, making sure that all of these teeth are uniform, that they're not broken or chipped in any regard. While we're at it, the other one, we can do the same on the other one. Treat the brothers alike. Again, that one I knew all along was okay, but just to show you that we've got a nice, easy turning set of bearings at this point. Same idea here. And you can do this as much or as little as you want, but right now it's telling us that that's fine. Okay, so let's go reinstall then. We're going to reinstall by putting in the main gear. We already put some lubrication on the pinion drive. We can go ahead and put a little bit more on here. Don't want to overload it. You'll find yourself in the same situation that we did before, where the stuff dries and makes a mess out of things. Next up then is the crosswind block. You saw that we took the crosswind lever off. So the crosswind block has a little stub. That stub rides in the channel. I just want to get, there's a little bit of grease left over here where the shaft is going to come in. That stub rides in the channel. Like that. And we can put the main shaft in. And once we put that shaft in, then we can put the screw back in. And we're almost done with the downtown service, and we're going to go up top there and just make sure the drags are okay as well. But I already know this reel is going to make a tremendous difference just in terms of cleaning it up, getting the old grease out, and putting the proper lubrication in going back. Okay, so we're just putting the screw back into the crosswind block. Now we can grab that crosswind arm. Set that in. We can press down on that bearing there, make sure that we can get that back in. And this is kind of the opposite of the way we brought it back. Put the case on. And I apologize again. Those of you that know me have a appreciation for my camera seems to go out at that time limit there. So we just put the case back on. So let's pick it up. We'll put the screws in. We used the case to push the that bearing that I had pulled off down. Now we just want to put the side plate screws on. And what I like to do on these is just firm them up, but not drive them down completely. I like to make sure that all of the holes line up and all of the screws are taken, and I'm not cross-stripping anything before I go in and do a last tightening on it. So 2 out of 3. This one should go in, and this one you can drive all the way home. Speaking of driving, a lot of folks ask me about the mechanical screwdrivers. Should we use them? Could we use them? And I have mixed emotions on that. I know that some folks don't have the hand strength, need it. Go ahead and use it. I don't mind so much on the takeout. On bringing them back in, I like to leave them proud, and then just have the last turn or two by hand, and I would recommend that you do that as well. Okay, so we've got the whole assembly back in. We're going to go ahead and put the screw back on, put the arm in, tighten that screw up. And again, as I mentioned, we were going to change that over so that it's a left-hand crank, not a right. And again, if you want to make a right-hand crank, just swap these out on the sides. What a difference that is already. I'm checking a couple of things. The operation of this thing, obviously. 3-ball bearings, it's a nice reel, especially for the time, making sure that the shaft is going up and down. We lubed the bail, but now we want to make sure that it, when it hits, it turns, and it certainly does. And then all I want to do now is just show you the upper end on this now with the drag service. So the drags are held in by a C-clip. For that, you're going to need a little pin or an awl or something like that so that you can sneak it in. There's a little groove behind here. You can see the C-clip sitting. What you want to do then is grab it, and it is a spring, so I'm going to hold my hand on the one side so that it doesn't shoot out. And then once I got it worked on the one side, I'm going to grab that tab as I work to take the other side out. There you go. So that's, and you can see it just shot off my finger there. Fortunately, it didn't shoot far. But that's the spring that rides in the groove and holds the drags in place. So now we should be able to just tap these drags out, or just kind of work them out here. And these are These are Teflon drags, and one more there. The bottom one is a rubber. Fishing that out. So the rubber one, we're fine. It's flexible. That's all it needs to be. You don't need to do anything. I do want to clean the channel out here. Let's go ahead and do that. A lot of the real repair is not necessarily about just pull and replace parts. It's a lot of house cleaning. You just want to make sure that this stuff is nice and clean. We'll take that rubber one and just put it right back in. That one goes on the bottom. You want to make sure that you're aware of how these set up along the way. If you're not, take pictures. If you need to, go get a schematic. But this is the traditional setup on a fishing reel, spinning reel. It has a flat washer or fabric or some other piece, carbon tex. It could be felt, whatever. Flat one goes, then you have a round washer, and this one, it's got a flat side to it, so match that up with the post. Then we have the second of these, and again, this is like a Teflon, doesn't need any kind of lubrication on it. Teflon is a petroleum product, and by nature is a self-lubricating. Then we have the keyed or eared washer. That one fits in the slots in there. You can see those slots, which were convenient for us to take the C-clip out. And then the last one is the round one, which goes up top. Now, if these weren't cleaned, again, you could use a buff, like a steel wool-like, but in this case they're clean, don't need anything. And then we're going to put that back in. Again, spring, so you want to load. You don't want to load it where the tab is in that little section. You want to put the tab past there, get that into the slot, and then put pressure on it from the other side so that you can seat it. Making sure you hold this, because again, it's a spring, so you don't want to lose this shooting across the workbench or any other place for that matter, because it'll be difficult to find. Okay, so we're properly seated. Come back in with the screw set. A little bit of dirt underneath there. We can clean that up quickly. It looks like it's more dried grease, which seems to be the theme of this reel. And again, just want to make sure that everything is nice and clean as you go to put it back into service. So take your time. It's once a year is the recommended service. I found this one in a flea market, so I don't know when it was last serviced. And we found from our experience here that it's been a while because all of the grease is dried. So take your time. Go ahead and do that. Okay, so we're almost done, except that one of the reasons I use my, there we go, that's holding tight, my parts tray is to make sure that I don't have any parts left over. And I just noticed that I do have a part left over, and that was from the side plate screw into the main gear. So another advantage to using the parts tray is you don't forget about things. And if you do forget about things, it reminds you before you go put the this back in the service. So this is a Daiwa that was made in Japan. There's several Daiwas that came after that, Silver Series and the like, that was where production was moved to Korea. This isn't one of them. Again, it's the Gold Series. It was a classic at the time. You can see why. Solid 3 ball bearings when the competition of the day was 1 or 2 ball bearings from like the Ryobis or the Penn Silver Series or even the Daiwa Silver Series. But nice smooth operator. This one's ready to go back fishing. So there we go. That's the GS13, restored, relubed, drag serviced, bail serviced, ready to go fishing. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something from it. And if you have a GS series, be proud of it. Go do some of the work that we just did here and go put it back out fishing. These aren't meant to sit on the shelves. These are meant to catch fish. So go ahead and go do that. So with that, if you liked the video, please indicate that. If you want to see more, please subscribe. Again, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.